Richard from Global Distribution, and I'm here for ESV TV to talk to you about the new Atomos Flame series. So the Flame series comprises of two models, which is the Shogun Flame and the Ninja Flame. These are evolutionary products coming from the original Shogun and Ninja Assassin products, which were hugely popular as monitor recorder products for DSLR, mirrorless camera, pro video cameras and cinema cameras. So Atomos are renowned for their ease of use within the OS. So we have the same 7.1-inch panel which was on the original models, running a 1920 by 1200 resolution. Everything is touchscreen operated and we show a completely uncropped image within that. The change that we've made with the Flame series, though, comes to the industrial design of the unit and the actual technology that drives this panel. So the unit, as you can see, now has a refreshed industrial design, which has integrated bumpers into the product, has kind of a lip on the front, the back is also much more sturdy, and everything is just much more tightly designed for professional in-field use to protect the unit while on a shoot. The panel itself, though, has been upgraded. So whereas the previous generations and most other monitors on the market are in the region of about 400 to 500 nit brightness, which is sort of 4 or 5 times the standard for Rec. 709, where white is at 100 nit. So screen panels generally just get a bit brighter, enabling you to use those in more ambient light conditions to see the clarity on the image much better. So the Flame series now has a new 1500 nit brightness screen. So when I'm working in a traditional Rec. 709 environment, shooting log, etc., I can now go outside and this is a complete day bright screen. I don't need to use a hood, so I can now be hood free for my shooting. However, we've made an evolution into this which incorporates HDR technology. So as screen brightnesses have got better, it's just aided with this environmental viewing environment. So what HDR essentially does is HDR is now using the brightness technology of modern panels to actually show an increased level of dynamic range. So this screen panel is actually capable of 10 stops of dynamic range, which is kind of the HDR standard. And HDR as a full-blown standard starts at 1000 nits to show that accurately. At 1500 nit, we're actually exceeding that, so we can then show full HDR at a good brightness level as well. So HDR is a huge evolution from what was Rec. 709. So it's the biggest change to the way that we view content in the last 30 years. Rec. 709, the standard which our screen panels are actually calibrated to, so out the factory you know that these are color accurate, is 6 stops of dynamic range, and that's been the standard since 1992. That was a very marginal increase on the original standard, which was Rec. 601, which dates back to 1982. So pretty much for the last 30 years or so, the way we view color, the way we see dynamic range at home on any kind of display hasn't changed. HDR is revolutionizing that, and it's going to push this very much from a consumable point of view. People like Netflix and Amazon already delivering HDR content, people like Vimeo adopting it, and others are going to be following suit very, very soon. Lots of the commercial TVs that are now being sold to you are HD capable, or existing panels from maybe the last 6 months to a year are receiving firmware updates to be HDR compatible. So there's going to be a big drive to actually generating content for HDR in the same way that there was the move to HD and 4K. The interesting thing with HDR is it applies to both HD and 4K. So no longer do you have to say, well, you have to buy a new camera. If you have an HD camera or a 4K camera that is log capable, then you have a camera which supports shooting HDR. The issue is that you would normally be looking at an image that looks very much like this, which is a log image. Which makes it very difficult to ascertain exposure or actually see where that is. What Atomos have done, which is very unique in the industry and is standard across the Flame series and the forthcoming Inferno, which incidentally won Best Monitor of NAB award. So this screen technology you see on the Shogun Flame, Ninja Flame, and the forthcoming Inferno is industry-leading screen technology and award-winning. Atomos have this custom HDR engine. So when I go into HDR, it's a similar principle of applying a LUT in a Rec. 709 space, where you take a log image and you're basically remapping obviously the white pointer colors, etc., to obviously give a certain look to an image. But with a LUT, you're still bound to this 6 steps of dynamic range. So you're either crushing the blacks to get the detail in the highlights, or you're kind of losing some of the detail in the highlights to get a kind of mid-range exposure where you want. So traditional kind of normal issues of this is a sunset, for example. Do I get the sunset exposed correctly but I lose all detail in the foreground, or do I get the foreground but lose all the detail in the sunset? HDR and the dynamic range capabilities of it allows me to get both to a degree. It's much closer to what our eyes naturally see, which is 14 to 16 stops of dynamic range is really where our eyes are, depending on the scene of what we're looking at. So whenever you watch content traditionally, you're shoehorning that into this 6 stops of dynamic range. So with the Atom HDR engine, we are completely logarithmic aware of the curves that the actual cameras are applying in a log image. Cameras obviously have sensors which are capable of much more than 6 stops of dynamic range. It's just normally you're shoehorning that dynamic range into a Rec. 709 space. So when we shoot log though, as you can see here, when I go into log mode, I'm compressing the luminance within the actual sensor data, so that I'm actually seeing the detail within all the low lights and the shadows, but I'm also seeing the detail in the highlights, but nothing is underexposed or overexposed. But traditionally we would expose this image far down so that we actually get a decent log to Rec. 709 direct conversion. And Atomos have that functionality built straight in. We can go log to video, we can select this as a Sony camera, we're shooting S-Log3, we can select the gamut, and now I can essentially expose correctly based on how that will look for Rec. 709. Coming back to my original log image, this is what I have. The issue comes with HDR. Because I have this extra dynamic range, I can push the actual log exposure much further than I can with Rec. 709, which enables me that when a colorist is going to grade this for HDR, they can get the actual maximum quality out of the image, like make things very bright, but still get all of that detail in the dark. So when I come into the HDR mode, I actually have the ability to have this slider. So I have my standard dynamic range here, and then I can move the slider and I can see a percentage change from how far beyond Rec. 709 I am in terms of a percentage, and also in terms of stops of dynamic range. So we have an auto HDR button which will adjust it to the actual dynamic range of the scene, and then you can see here on my waveform I actually have, as my slider moves, I actually have this adjustable threshold on it. So I can very easily see where the limit on my waveform for my exposure is. So as I go into that auto HDR, I now know I can push this image far further to get all of the detail in the highlights and still keep that detail in the lowlights as well. So Atomos have worked with all of the camera manufacturers out there, such as that have log-aware cameras or log-based cameras, such as Sony, Arri, Panasonic, Canon, JVC, etc., and Red. And it's a simple process that I literally can flick through here, select the camera vendor, I can select the type of log, and then I can actually select the gamut. And this will now apply the Atom HDR algorithm to actually remap and display the HDR image in its true form based on the actual log output from the camera. So it's a simple thing that you are shooting what you see. You are literally setting your exposure correctly, you're applying the processing to the log image, and you are able to actually just shoot and expose and focus on this screen based on what your eyes are actually seeing until it's as close as it is. It's as simple as that. But that then means that that log image that we've actually recorded, we're not burning in any of this HDR processing. This log image can then be taken into the post-production process and graded for an HDR delivery very easily. The other benefit that we have within the HDR engine in the Flame series is actually the ability to output this. So numerous people are now coming out with higher quality HD televisions or HD monitors for use on set or in the studio. What we can actually do is output from here on set during a shoot using this PQ output. So by applying a PQ output, what we're doing is we're now actually taking the image that we're processing on here with all of the remapping and the true HDR image now being displayed. We're outputting this on the HDMI or the SDI output so that this can now go out to a monitor which is HDR capable, and display that correctly. So we select the PQ output. Again, we can select the gamut, so whether it's the native video source or BT 2020 or DCI P3 color spaces. And then we can essentially have a slider here for the brightness of the screen. So if I was going to plug this into a standard, industry meeting HDR TV, then I could set this to 1000 nit, because that's really where something needs to be to show it correctly. But likewise, Sony and some other manufacturers now have screens that can go up to 300 nit, 3000 nits. So I can now output this correctly. So it's going to display that image correctly on that screen. We also, in terms of inputting on the Flame series, do have the ability to do a PQ input. So if, for example, I'm wanting to start grading some stuff quite quickly, maybe I'm on a low budget HDR production, and I want to try and do as much of this as possible before paying for a colorist or studio use, I can actually do a PQ input on here as well. So if I've shot some footage in HDR and then I'm editing it on my laptop or through DaVinci Resolve, I can now output that, for example, into the actual Flame series unit, set this to a PQ input, and then actually I can use this as a crude grading monitor to actually start working with that footage and color grading it, and then really just paying for some studio time to go in and fine tune it, or renting in a monitor for those days that you want to just kind of fine tweak that HDR grade. So as well as having the ability to take the log output from a camera and actually see what that is capable of in HDR, so you can actually get the most out of how you expose your log image. We also have the ability to aid your post-production process by allowing you to output from your NLE into here and see how that looks to start grading with as well. So we're giving you full HDR end-to-end capability within the Flame series. But on top of that, we have all of the same features that Atomos users are very, very familiar with. So we have the full built-in conversion on the Shogun Flame, where we can have HDMI input, HDMI output, SDI input, output, and kind of mix and match of that, just choose which one we're inputting. We have 4K recording, we have 4K to HD down conversion on the output as well. So if I'm doing a shoot here with a 4K camera recording 4K, but I've got a producer director I want to output to an HD monitor, it's very, very easy to do that. It's just a simple down convert in here, and that can be automatically auto-detecting over an HDMI connection as well. We can also do things like pre-roll record, so we're giving you a rolling 8-second HD buffer or a 2.5 second 4K buffer, depending on the quality that I'm recording. We're taking whatever input is coming in and going straight into an edit-ready format, which is visually lossless at the highest quality, which is like Apple's ProRes or Avid's DNX HD or DNX HR for high resolution. We also have Cinema DNG Raw recording, which is about to be launched as a firmware update, which will be free of charge. So we will support Cinema DNG recording initially from Sony FS Raw. We also support Canon Raw, but Canon Raw is just a decode to ProRes or DNX. Main reason for that is Canon only actually output a 10-bit 422 RAW signal, so there's no point to actually record that as RAW. You might as well just record it as ProRes HQ or DNX HQX, for example. So you're not losing anything. You've just got a much easier file to work with. We have all of our monitor assist, so things like focus peaking, which is customizable, so I can grayscale the image, outline only the image. So either kind of have that monochrome or see the color. Choose the color of my focus peaking. We have zebras adjustable from 50% all the way to 105% for overs. Things like false color, blue only, frame guides, which are 16:9, 2.4, 185, 1.9, 4:3, title safety zones, etc. in there. We can do an anamorphic D Squeeze, so for using any cameras where you're using anamorphic lenses, we can do a D Squeeze again at 2:1, 1.5, 1.33, etc. We have full 1:1 pixel zooming as well, which obviously all our focus tools work with, so I can very easily make adjustments. I can do a 2:1 on that as well, and as you can see, it's incredibly intuitive and easy to use these kind of features. I can either pan around in there or pan and scan on the actual screen itself. We have full waveform tools, so we have our waveform for Luma, which we can have as quarter, third, full screen. I have the ability to also have that as an RGB parade. We do a vector scope as well, and we do a zoom on the center point of the vector. So all of the tools that you would normally buy an external monitor for are all built into the Flame series as they were previous generation Atomos products. We also have expanded metadata tagging, so while you're actually recording or in playback mode between takes, we can come in and we can favorite or reject parts of a clip, we can mark in overexposure, I've heard a bit of bad audio that might need to be fixed in post. So all of these kind of tools which are designed to export as an XML, so we can go into the edit process already knowing what's good, what's bad, where maybe issues need to be addressed, etc. That's already built into the system. In terms of the actual monitor mode, we have the HDR functionality that I've explained. You can view the native source video, or I can do a standard log to video conversion and select obviously the type of log that I'm working with, etc. To see what that looks like, or I can apply a custom look. With custom looks, I can have them as a full screen. I can go to a split screen view. I also have the ability to burn in the LUT, of which case I get a warning icon in the screen up here to show you that I'm committing this grade to the actual recording. Particularly good for doing LUT boxes. Say if I was coming out of a cinema camera, like a Red or an ARRI, I can do a burn-in proxy to immediately start recording from. Or if you're on a super quick turnaround, client wants a certain look to a piece of footage, but you know, they don't have the budget to pay you to color grade it, you don't have the time to color grade it based on the delivery. You can actually burn this in while you're actually recording as well. So we have all of this functionality built in. We also then have time-lapse recording. So this was a feature that was originally introduced on the original Shogun and the Ninja Assassin, which is hugely popular, particularly within the photographic market. We have time-lapse built in. So with time-lapse, we create a sequence. So what I want to record, so how many frames, seconds, minutes or hours, how often I want to record that for, and the total duration I want that to run for. But the nice thing we can also do with our time-lapse is we can create multiple sequences. So I can create up to 10 different sequences, and I can also then set a state of how those sequences are worked with. Do they run through in order? Do they go through in reverse? Do they go through and then reverse backwards, etc. So I have lots of functionality in there to get quite creative with my time-lapse, how dense it is, duration of it, etc. I can also schedule a start time for it. So again, particularly good for sunrises and sunsets. I don't want to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning to film it, so I can prep the night before, get everything framed correctly, set this all up for how I want it to work, schedule the start time, and away I go. We can also do smooth transitions. So again, if you're using multiple sequences or changing things quite a bit, or even within a normal sequence, it will just take the keyframe either side of each time-lapse section, and it just puts a soft gradient across it. So again, more post-production tools that can be done in real time while we're recording our time-lapse, just to speed up that post lead time. There's nothing I need to do to this footage afterwards. I can even burn in a LUT to this, for example, if I was shooting my time-lapse in log, for example. So it's very, very easy to have that time-lapse. Final thing is we have comprehensive audio recording as standard built into all of our units. So either 8 channels of audio embedded on the HDMI, up to 12 channels of audio on the SDI. And then we have the analog audio, which on the Shogun Flame is a LEMO breakout cable to XLR. So 2 XLR in, 2 XLR out. And we have the option to have that as a line level, mic level. I can provide phantom power to that, or I can have it a pro balance level as well. And my outputs are adjustable from 15 dBu to 24 dBu as well. The difference with the Ninja Flame, the Ninja Flame is HDMI only. So this is purely HDMI in and out. Whereas the Shogun has the SDI in and out and Genlock on the back as well. But also the audio input is different. On the Ninja Flame, this is a mic stroke line. The mic there's no phantom power, it can just be set to it. So if I'm using something like a self-powered mic with a DSLR or mirrorless camera, it's perfect for that. Shogun obviously allows me to treat this more as an external professional audio recorder, rather than having to use a separate audio recorder to do that. So what I have the ability to do in playback now is actually choose a speed, either reverse motion or forward motion, and play back footage at a reduced speed or at full speed. Particularly useful if you want to just review a normal shot backwards slightly just to check framing or focus, or forwards. But likewise, it's very, very easy if I've shot something at a high frame rate. So the Shogun Flame and the Ninja Flame support essentially 4K P30. higher frame rates for HD if possible, up to 120 frames a second, depending on camera outputs. So if I've shot something at 1080 60p and I want to see how that naturally looks back at 30p, I can come into here and use this slow motion slider just to set that appropriately in forwards or reverse motion. Particularly relevant, this is coming to the Shogun Inferno as well, which is due for a release later in Q3 of this year. And the Shogun Inferno is capable of doing 4K P60 and 240 frames per second in HD. So that will allow me to, say, shoot something at 240 frames a second and see what that looks back at a normal kind of lower frame rate. So I've got that kind of natural slow motion. And it's just a simple process with this slider here within playback, and then I can always just change that and move it back to a normal speed at any point. So thank you very much for watching this video. For more information, visit atomos.com, and for pricing and availability, do check out eastwoodsoundandvision.com.